What's up? Ghost Fictions is here, and we're back again. This is the first part of a story where Izuku married with RWBY girls. It's just a normal day at UA as Izuku's blonde bombshell of a girlfriend Yang and their friends arrive at UA, resulting in an extremely crazy adventure. But before we start, please consider subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Don't forget to check the description for more informations, and support the amazing author DevDog756 for writing this story. Now, let's get into part 1. It was just a normal day at UA as Izuku, son of Inko and Toshinori Yagi, was just relaxing in the common area at UA while writing notes in his journal while plenty of chaos was ensuing, mostly Mineta and Kaminari being perverts as Izuku just rolled his eyes as he kept writing his notes. However, things got more loud when Izuku's old childhood friend and bully Katsumi Bakugo started yelling at everyone like usual as Izuku wasn't having it as he closed his journal and walked towards his dorm room as Katsumi stopped screaming and just looked at Izuku with sadness. As for when Izuku was little, he and his mother were told that his quirk needed more time to develop, but the amount of time that it would take wasn't known, and when Izuku didn't show signs of having a quirk like the other kids, he immediately started getting bullied by all the kids, with Katsumi being the main offender, with her starting to refer to Izuku as Deku. And Katsumi and her goons kept beating Izuku every day for 4 years straight, keeping it a secret from all the teachers and threatening Izuku with more violence if he ever told anyone about it, which really messed with Izuku as he really wanted to tell his parents, but he was worried that would destroy the friendship between Izuku's parents and Katsumi's parents, so he ultimately kept quiet. However, one day, Izuku's parents arrived at school to surprise their son, but they ended up walking in on Izuku getting beat by Katsumi, someone they thought was their son's best friend, as Toshinori was about to intervene. Izuku was pushed over the edge, which led to his quirk activating at last, as he blasted Katsumi's goons with lightning, which shocked Katsumi as she screamed at Izuku for lying to her for being quirkless, until Izuku snapped at her and told her that his quirk needed time to develop. Katsumi tried to refute that, but remembered Izuku telling her that as she regretted everything she did to the boy she had a crush on and tried to apologize, but Inko and Toshinori stepped in front of their son as Inko slapped Katsumi, which definitely surprised her as Inko and Toshinori went to the teachers. And when they did, they learned that the teachers had next to no idea what Katsumi was doing to Izuku, as she got brought into the office and told them what she did to Izuku for the past 4 years. The worst things of all was that she told Izuku he would be better of killing himself, as everyone was disappointed in her as Inko and Toshinori left with Izuku and didn't say a word to Katsumi. After that incident, they got Izuku's quirk changed and discovered Izuku could control lightning, fire, water, light and darkness, which definitely surprised Izuku as his parents were both happy for their son. And shortly after that, Inko and Toshinori stormed towards to Katsumi's home as they told her parents everything their brat had did to Izuku, which shocked and infuriated them, as Mitsuki immediately grounded Katsumi and sent her to her room as she and Masaru tried to apologize, but Inko slapped them, telling them their friendship was over and that their whole family can drop dead, as she and Toshinori left and slammed the door behind them. And a few days after that, Izuku and his family moved without telling anyone where they moved, as Mitsuki straight up blamed Katsumi for destroying her relationship with her best, not while Masaru was very disappointed with her, while Katsumi had to live with the guilt of bullying and telling the boy she liked to kill himself over something so stupid. And the kicker is she has no idea Izuku's the son of the #1 hero. 10 years later, Katsumi ran into Izuku during the entrance exam for UA University, and when she tried talking to Izuku, he completely ignored her, mostly during the physical part of the exam, as they were paired in the same area, and she didn't even get the chance to say something to him as the exam ended. Well, Izuku has definitely changed since the last time she saw him. The once defenseless boy she bullied for 4 years straight was now destroying any of the pointer robots that Izuku came across with ease, as Katsumi noticed Izuku seemed to prefer using his lightning, but Izuku also helped anyone he came across and even helped them have a chance to pass as he kept zipping around. Eventually the zero pointer came out as everyone else ran away from it, but Izuku quickly saved someone who was in the way of the zero pointer, as Izuku used his lightning to fly as he changed to his fire and blasted the zero pointer, but Katsumi was barely able to see lightning sparking off the fire as Izuku completely destroyed the zero pointer, shocking everyone there, especially the teachers, but not his parents. And since both of them joined UA, Katsumi kept trying to talk with Izuku, but Izuku either ignored her or just barely acknowledged her. And then one day after the USJ, Izuku did decide to talk with Katsumi, but he made it extremely clear he only saw her as a classmate and nothing more, which hurt Katsumi as she swore she'd make Izuku come around, but she had no idea she had no chance of getting with Izuku. Izuku was walking towards his room as he saw his adopted daughter Eri and best friend Momo Yaoi Rozu. "Papa." Eri said as Izuku kneeled to Eri's level and hugged his daughter, as Momo smiled. You ready to hang out with Auntie Momo? Izuku asked as the little snowball smiled and nodded, which made Izuku smile. You sure you don't want to join us, Izuku? Momo asked. Yeah, I'm sure. I'll let you and Eri have girl time together. Izuku said as Eri hugged him as she and Momo left the dorms, as Izuku eventually reached his room as he closed the door, as he kept on writing his notes in peace for a while, until he decided he wrote enough notes for one day, as he opened his computer and messed around in it for a while, until he got a video call request from someone he knows, as Izuku just smiled and answered and saw the face of his beautiful girlfriend, Yang Xiaolong. Hey Yang. Izuku said while smiling his typical smile, which Yang always loved seeing as she smiled back. Hey Izuku. How's my elemental manipulating boyfriend doing? Yang asked while she and Izuku looked into each other's eyes. Seeing you and hearing your beautiful voice, far better than I was before. Izuku said, which made Yang blush, but a different face appeared upside down in front of the screen, that being Yang's younger half-sister Ruby Rose. Hey Izuku. Ruby said, extremely cheerfully and with a smile on her face as Yang moved her out of the way, annoyed over the fact Ruby got in the way of the view of Izuku. Not fair, Yang. Is it too much to ask to hang out with my future brother-in-law? Ruby complained. Tough luck, Rubes, he's my boyfriend. Yang shot back to her sister. Yang, you always hug Izuku to yourself whenever we see him. Ruby complained back to Yang. Hey, I miss my boyfriend, little sis. That a crime, Yang shouted back as Izuku just chuckled to himself as the sisters kept arguing. Yang, you literally have a scrapbook filled to the brim with pictures of Izuku, lots of which have lots of kiss marks. Replied Ruby as both Izuku and Yang blushed hearing that. Izuku for learning about that while Yang was extremely embarrassed. Ruby somehow found it and mentioned it in front of Izuku. How did you find that, Ruby? I thought I hid it. Yang shouted out while stuttering and still blushing. You mean in Blake's book pile? Yeah, you did. Ruby said as Yang's jaw dropped from further embarrassment. I picked it out because it looked so out of place, which makes me wonder why Blake hasn't noticed it yet. Ruby wondered out loud as Blake was still blushing, but also getting mad, which gave Ruby the hint she should book it, which she did. Yang took a moment to calm down as she looked back at Izuku, who was blushing the same bright red she was, as there was an awkward silence for a moment until Izuku broke it. I didn't think you missed me that much, Yang. Izuku said, which made Yang more embarrassed and blushed even harder than before. If it makes you feel any better, I've been dreaming about you a lot. Admitted Izuku while blushing, which got Yang's attention. Oh really? What kind of dreams? Yang asked while blushing, but regained her confidence and smirked at Izuku, which made him slightly blush more. Well, they're usually of us together and alone. Izuku said. Keep going, handsome, Yang said to Izuku with a flirty tone in her voice. And we're holding each other very closely. Izuku continued as he saw Yang look at him as he kept going. And then Izuku then got cut off by a knock at his door as he heard Iida on the other side, which made him and Yang extremely annoyed as he got up and answered the door. I swear to God, Iida, this better be good. Izuku said while trying to mask his annoyance with Iida. Miyagi, you were dozing off during class and keep missing out studying. That is unexceptional behavior for the class rep. You must be focused on your schoolwork at all times and… Yeah, that's great and all, Iida, but I'm going to have to correct you. I've made notes for all of our classes and are up to date with all of them as well, and I do make sure I study, but I also make sure I have some free time. Maybe if you get that stick out of your ass, you could see that. Izuku said as Iida looked like an idiot as Izuku went to shut the door, but Iida spoke up again. Who were you talking to? Iida questioned, which definitely made Izuku had enough of his shit for one day. None of your business. Izuku said bluntly as he closed the door in Iida's face as he walked back to his bed and sat down and continued talking with Yang. Sorry about that, babe, had to deal with that stickler I have in my class I told you about. Izuku said to Yang as he laid against his pillows. Oh yeah, that guy with the stick up his ass, right? Yang said while laughing as Izuku laughed as well. Right on the money. God, he gets on my nerves sometimes, trying to micromanage the hell out of my class and make us do things his way. I even considered making him class rep but decided against it, smart move on my part. Izuku said as Yang played with her hair. Yeah, sounds like you really dodged a bullet there, babe. Just hearing about this guy makes me think Weiss isn't that bad with heckling us about studying. Yang remarked. No, Yang, Weiss gets on your backs because she wants you guys to do better in class. Iida just wants to boss everyone around. Izuku corrected his girlfriend. Yeah, that checks out. And his attitude reminds me of how Weiss acted when we first started Beacon. Yang said while chuckling. Well, when you grow up with a father who's a corrupt and petty bastard, a massive racist and a leech who only cares about himself and himself alone, not exactly a right or easy way to cope with that. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I wouldn't know what it's like to cope with growing up with a shitty parent. Like, neither of my parents have ever beaten me. Yang said as Izuku looked at her. Well, the only thing your dad's beating is the amount of puns a person can reasonably make in a day. Izuku remarked, which made Yang laugh. He's not that bad with puns, babe. Said Yang as Izuku just looked at her, deadpan. Yang, need I remind of the time you and your dad made over 500 puns in one day? Izuku asked as Yang had no response to that. Alright, you have a point. Yang said, defeated as RWBY walked back into the room with an apology cookie, as Yang just chuckled as she ruffled RWBY's hair and accepted her apology. Hey, how's John doing by the way? Izuku asked, curious about his best buddy. Great. Getting him together with Purah really did lots to boost his confidence. Said Yang as she looked into the emerald green eyes of her boyfriend. Yeah, I mean got more confident when I met you, Yang. Izuku said while smiling his smile at Yang. The two talked for an extremely long time as they eventually had to say bye to each other as they both hung up as Izuku thought to himself for a moment. Oh, Yang's going to be very surprised when she meets Eri. Izuku thought to himself. Meanwhile Yang had a big smile on her face as RWBY just looked at her. Yang, why didn't you tell Izuku about that exchange program thing we're in? We both know he'll be happy to know we're going to UA. RWBY asked. That's the thing, Rubes, it'll be even better if it's a surprise to him. Yang told RWBY with a proud tone in her voice. Assuming John doesn't tell him. Yang, me and you both know Izuku and John can't keep secrets from each other for long. RWBY said. Yeah, but I thought of that and made sure to tell John not to say a thing about this to Izuku. Yang explained to RWBY. A couple of days passed as Izuku was just minding his own business and he suddenly found himself getting pinned to the wall by a very angry Kitsumi. That's doze it, Izuku, I'm done playing around, you dense fucker. Kitsumi yelled, but Izuku was confused by what she was talking about. Huh? What are you on about, Bakugo? Izuku asked with genuine confusion in his voice. You dense dumbus, I've been dropping hints I like you like crazy and you never picked up on them. She yelled in Izuku's face, which gathered a crowd as Izuku shoved her back. Oh, I did notice, Bakugo, I just don't share your feelings. Why should I have feels for a girl who bullied me and beat me mentally and physically for 4 years because you thought I didn't have a quirk even though I said it needed time? That made everyone gasp, especially the people who Kitsumi was close with, not knowing what Kitsumi did to Izuku. And you're rude, you think you're better than everyone and well, I'm already taken by a very beautiful girl. That statement completely shocked Kitsumi and the whole class, Momo especially since she developed feelings for Izuku but felt dejected knowing he had a girlfriend. What? Who the fuck is your girlfriend? Yelled Kitsumi at Izuku as he was about to answer her question when he got caught by surprise as he saw two groups of people. Hold the phone, what are you guys doing here? Izuku yelled in surprise as Yang basically tackled Izuku and kissed him, to the surprise of everyone and to Kitsumi's anger, since she already knew who Yang was and wasn't happy seeing her. Surprise, Izuku. Yang said as Izuku was blushing. Yang, when did you all get here and why? Of course I'm really happy to see you guys. Izuku asked as he and Yang got back up. Our schools are doing an exchange program and we're the two lucky teams to come to UA. Yang explained to Izuku as he looked over to John. How come you didn't say anything, man? Izuku asked his best buddy. Yang told me not to. John said back as Izuku immediately understood why as Eri walked into the room. Papa, who's that pretty lady holding your arm? Eri asked as teams RWBY and JNPR were shocked hearing this little girl call Izuku Papa, Yang especially as Izuku guided Eri to Yang. Eri, this is Yang Xiaolong, and she's my girlfriend. Eri took a second to think about what Izuku told her as she put together the fact that if Yang's dating her papa, that means she her mama as Eri ran up to Yang and smiled. Hi mama. Eri said while smiling as Yang was speechless as she quickly picked up Eri and hugged her. Oh, you're so adorable, Snowball. Yang said while hugging Eri as RWBY walked up to Eri. Hi Snowball, I'm your auntie RWBY. RWBY said as Yang handed Eri to her sister as the two hugged. Oh lord, now there's two of them. Y said while Blake couldn't process the cuteness and wholesomeness before her. Yang wasn't the only one with a surprise. John said as he placed his arm around Izuku, to which Izuku did the same. We were on the wavelength. Izuku said as they both saw both Purah and Nora both up in arms over how adorable Eri is. I take it this happens a lot. Ren asked as Izuku simply nodded yes. Too often it happens. Izuku said as Yang finally noticed Kitsumi who glaring at her as she stood face to face with her. Well, I'm surprised you're here, Mutt. Yang said, which made Kitsumi growl at her. What the hell are you doing here, Blondie? Kitsumi asked while growling. You do know we're both blonde, right? And did you not listen to what I said to Izuku, or has all those explosions popped your ears? Yang said while smirking. Can it blondie? Touched a nerve did I? Also, I'd ask if you're on your period, but you act like you are constantly. Yang said while giggling, which made Kitsumi more angry. Good one sis. RWBY said as she and Yang fist bumped as Yang looked at Izuku's class. Well, guess we should introduce ourselves. I'm Yang Xiaolong, and as you can guess, I'm Izuku's girlfriend. Everyone was still in shock of learning that Izuku has had a girlfriend the whole time they didn't know about, while the guys, mostly Mineta and Kaminari, were really jealous of Izuku as Mineta was looking at Yang's boobs and not even trying to hide it as Izuku zapped him with a lightning bolt while T-posing. Eyes to yourself, grapist. There's only one guy who can look at Yang's fun bags, and that's me. Izuku said with absolute confidence, which made Yang blush as Izuku got a bit bold and squeezed Yang's large juicy ass, which made her blush even more, and thankfully, nobody noticed at all. Dude, you've had a smoking hot. Kaminari stopped his sentence as he saw Izuku and Yang both glaring at him as the electric Dumbus was scared shitless. I meant, a perfectly fine and respectable girlfriend this whole time, and you never told us what the hell is up with that? Kaminari asked, while basically yelling at Izuku as he looked at him, deadpan. Well, for starters, it's none of your business to know if I'm dating someone. Plus, no one bothered asking. Izuku said as Kaminari quickly sat down as Yang kept glaring at him. How long was you two known each other? Shoto asked while eating soba while keeping a straight face. Since we were kids, and we've been close ever since. Izuku said as Yang smiles and placed his head on her shoulder. Yeah, we have. And you're a great boyfriend, Izuku. Yang said as she kisses Izuku on the cheek. I aim to make you happy, Yang. Izuku said as he kissed Yang back and wrapped his arms around her and gave her a hug while the class was dumbfounded, except for Kitsumi, who was completely vivid, and Momo, who was sad, seeing how she missed her chance to be with Izuku and seeing how happy he was with Yang, wishing it was her, but since Izuku's happy, there's nothing she can do about it. How long have you two been dating? Ichako asked as RWBY put Eri on her shoulder as Eri had fun being so high up. Oh, I've had the pleasure of dating this stud for the last 3 years. Yang said with a confident smirk as she winked at Izuku, which made the green-haired boy blush as Yang decided to introduce RWBY. Y sent Blake to Izuku's class as she saw RWBY carrying Eri on her shoulders as she handed the little snowball a cookie. Oh, RWBY's already fitting into being an aunt nicely. Yang thought to herself as she looked towards Izuku's class. Anyway, this lovable dork is my little sister RWBY, and these are our friends and teammates Waishni and Blake Belladonna. Yang said while RWBY was too preoccupied bonding with her niece. Rubes. Yang called to RWBY as quickly regained her focus as she put Eri on the ground. Right, together us four make Team RWBY, and I'm team leader. RWBY said as Iida, Kaminari and Shiro all started laughing, while Mineta was ogling RWBY. You team leader? Oh, that's beyond rich. Shiro said as he pointed at RWBY as he fell onto the ground. You're too cute and fragile to be doing any fighting. Kaminari said while laughing but also flirting with RWBY, seemingly forgetting that Yang's her older sister who scared him shitless. Someone like you isn't fit out for a leadership role. Iida said, being a condescending asshole, which made Weiss cringe, making her remember how much of a bitch she used to act like, which Blake rested her hand on her shoulder. Izuku and Yang were slowly getting pissed off with the disrespect RWBY was getting as they were about to say something when RWBY pulled out Crescent Rose, absolutely shocking the three and made them immediately shut up and also made Mineta piss his pants and pass out of fear. Is that a fucking scythe? Kaminari asked while yelling out of fear as Yang smirked, being proud of her little sister. It's also a customizable high-impact sniper rifle, of my own design. RWBY said with a hint of pride in her voice as Kaminari and Shiro were both confused. It's also a gun. RWBY said, dumbing it down for them while Eri had stars in her eyes. Whoa, you made that by yourself, Auntie RWBY, that's so cool. Eri said while hopping up and down, which made RWBY smile as she put Crescent Rose away and lifted her snowball niece back onto her shoulder. Thanks, Eri. RWBY said as she smiled and ruffled Eri's hair. Well, if there's not further interruptions, I'm John Ark, and I'm Izuku's real childhood friend. John said while not so subtly shooting Kitsumi a dirty look as he and Izuku fist bump. And these are my friends and teammates Nora Valkyrie, Pura Nikos and Lyren. John introduced his team as RWBY handed Eri to Nora, to which she immediately hugged the little snowball. Oh my gosh, how is she so adorable? Nora asked while hugging Eri as Izuku just chuckled. Trust me, none of us have the answer for that, Nora, she just is. Izuku said as Eri just giggled and hugged her Auntie Nora. So, any questions? Izuku asked his classmates while Yang was clinging onto his arm as Mina shot up with a question. Are either of those two single? Mina asked while pointing at John and Ren as Izuku looked at her, completely deadpan right as Pura wrapped her arms around John, while Nora did the same with Ren. Granted, she wrapped her right arm around him as she was holding Eri with her left arm, leaving Mina looking down at the ground. Any other questions? Izuku asked once more, hoping to get actual questions as most of his classmates started hounding him with questions, and of course a certain few people, Mineta and Kaminari, started asking things along the lines of if they already did, and how great it felt. Well, Mina asked Yang how big Izuku was, which annoyed both of them, and they ignored them. After a while of asking questions, Izuku, Yang and their friends were heading towards Izuku's room, while John was giving Eri a piggyback ride. Well, that went well, mostly. Yang said as she and Izuku held hands. Yeah, your classmates seem nice, aside from that creepy grape, that idiot with the lightning bolt on his hair, that walking tape dispenser, and that jerk with the glasses. Blake said as Izuku nodded in agreement. Ed is a rather, let's just say, a different person to get along with. Izuku said as Yang kissed him as the others all fake gagged, while Eri just giggled seeing her mama and papa happy. Oh, I've missed you, Izuku. I missed you too, Yang. Izuku said while smiling as they made it to his room and noticed Toshinori waiting outside the door. Oh, hey dad. Izuku said right when Eri yelled with joy seeing her grandpa as she climbed off RWBY's shoulders and ran to her grandpa and hugged him, leaving Toshinori with a smile on his face as he lifted Eri onto his shoulders as he pulled in his future daughter-in-law in for a hug before hugging Izuku. Enjoyed your surprise, my boy? Toshinori asked as Izuku just nodded while blushing. I had no idea my mom is so pretty, grandpa. Eri said, which made Yang happy as Toshinori ruffled her hair. That's about the only good thing she got from her birth mother. Toshinori thought to himself as he noticed John had something to ask. So, what's our room arrangement going to be exactly? Glad you asked, John. I talked with Nezu about it and I told him how close you all are with Izuku. So, Yang's sharing with Izuku, obviously, while you and your team will be in the room beside theirs, while RWBY, Mishni and Ms. Belladonna will share the room across from yours. Toshinori explained as John just gave a thumbs up. Toshinori then picked up some tension between Izuku and Yang as he immediately figured what was about to happen as he handed Eri back to RWBY as he went on his way. Hey Eri, why don't you spend time with your aunties and uncles? Me and your papa have some catching up to do. Yang said with a flirty tone in her voice, which made Izuku blush, while Eri thankfully didn't notice as she nodded and went off to hang out with RWBY and the others as Yang opened the door, dragged Izuku inside, closed and locked the door as she pushed Izuku onto the bed and kissed him. With lots of tounge. Whoa, Yang, Izuku said while surprised, but kissed her back as he ran his hand through her hair as they looked into each other's eyes. You have no idea how hard it took me to resist dragging you into a closet and pounce you in there, Yang said as Izuku could clearly hear the lust in her voice, which admittedly made Izuku pretty excited. Now, turn around, I have a little present for you, Yang said, seductively as Izuku blushed a bright red and immediately turned around and waited for his present, wondering what it was going to be, and after a while, Yang told Izuku he can turn back around as he looked back at Yang and definitely liked his present. What do you think, babe? Yang asked while doing a little pose for Izuku, which sent him into overdrive as he pulled Yang onto the bed and masked his lips against hers. Meanwhile, Toshinori was getting ready to head out for the day as he walked past Izawa as he heard the sleep-deprived hobo say something to him. Dear, I thought your brat couldn't be more of a trouble agent. Hearing that made Toshinori stop dead in his tracks as he turned around to face Izawa. Care to explain that, Izawa? Toshinori asked while trying to keep it together since the two were exactly on good terms, mostly due to Izawa having it out for Izuku for the sole reason of being Toshinori's kid. Out of everyone that problem child could have dated, he chose her. But then again, I can see why they're attracted to each other. Izawa said as Toshinori just glared at his colleague and clenched his fist. Let's get something straight here, Izawa. Inko and I raised Izuku to be a fine, upstanding young man. And I'd appreciate it if you'd stop giving him unreasonable amount of shit just because he's my son. Toshinori said, trying to keep it together and not throw Izawa through a wall. If that's the case, why allow him to date her in the first place, especially knowing who her mother and father are? Izawa said as Toshinori had enough as he pinned Izawa against the wall and was pissed. Don't you dare compare Yang to her. She is far from resembling her in other aspects except appearance-wise, and Tai and Summer raised her to be a fine young lady. I can let your distant for me slide, but don't you dare bring my friends into this. Am I clear? Toshinori yelled at Izawa, which made his beyond horrified and nodded his head as Toshinori dropped him and continued on his way. Meanwhile, the rest of the class were all still trying to recover from the bombshell of learning Izuku's already taken, especially Momo and Kitsumi, though Momo was genuine when they all heard something in the distance, that being the moans of Yang as they then heard her scream. Oh yes, breed me. Hearing that made all the guys made and the girls jealous, while Momo was just sad hearing the absolute bliss she was in right now. After a long while of catching up, Izuku and Yang were catching their breath as she was on top of him, while her bunny outfit was on the ground. Man, that's one way to catch up, Izuku said as he covered himself and Yang with the blanket. Yeah, you were on fire Izuku, literally Yang said with a dumb smile on her face, as Izuku just chuckled wrapped his arms around her. Good thing RWBY and the others took Eri out. Izuku said as Yang nodded in agreement as she rested her head against his chest. I love you Yang. Izuku proclaimed while smiling at Yang. I love you too Izuku. Yang said as she smiled back at him as the two lovebirds fell asleep while embracing each other. Izuku and Yang both woke up as they rested their foreheads together as she kissed him. Oh, I've missed this so much. Yang said as she rested her head against Izuku's chest as he smiled and kissed her on the head. Yeah, I've missed seeing your beautiful face when I wake up. Izuku said which made Yang blush as they got dressed and heard Eri outside as Yang quickly hid her bunny outfit under the bed as the door opened as Aya ran to her mama and papa and hugged them. Mama, papa. Eri said with glee as Izuku and Yang both hugged their little snowball, making her smile. Did you have fun Eri? Yang asked her snowball of a daughter as she nodded. Mama, we went to the park, Uncle John flew me around like an airplane, and Auntie RWBY got us cookies and cream ice cream. Eri said as Yang looked at RWBY, who was looking sheepishly as Yang just chuckled and kissed Eri on the forehead. Sorry we weren't there with you Snowball. Yang said as she patted Eri on the head. Don't be sad Mama, you missed Papa, and you wanted to spend time with him alone. And if you're happy, then I'm happy Mama. Eri told Yang which made her speechless as Eri smiled. Too precious. Was all Yang could say as she hugged her little Snowball and gave her head pats, making Izuku smile. Do you want to help me unpack my stuff Eri? Yang asked which made Eri's eyes light up as she immediately agreed to it and hugged Yang as Izuku decided to let them have some mother-daughter time as he left the room. Looks like you two had some fun while we were out. Izuku heard John behind him as he turned to look at his best friend as John pointed at a hickey Izuku had on his neck, which made him blush. This is karma for all the times I joked about the hickeys you got from Puraha. Izuku asked as John nodded and playfully hit Izuku's shoulder as Izuku just chuckled as he did the same with John as the two headed to the common area. In the common area, Momo was feeling down in the dumps while looking at a framed picture of her and Izuku together. Why are all the great guys already taken? Momo asked herself as a few tears fell onto the picture as she wiped her tears away while thinking about all the time she spent with Izuku. I feel so dirty, liking someone who was off the market the whole time. Izuku's so happy with Xiaolong, but I really love him. But I can't do anything about my feelings without making Izuku hate me. Momo said when someone ripped the picture from her hand and smashed it on the ground as Momo got up and saw it was Katsumi. Bet over yourself Ponytail. You never once had a chance with Izuku. Katsumi said as Momo just glared at her. I had more of a chance with Izuku than you ever did Bakugo. He told me everything you did to him, why would he ever like someone who threw him away like trash over something so little as a quirk? You only want to be with Izuku because his quirk is powerful, nothing else. Momo yelled at Katsumi as the explosive bitch punched Momo in the face, sending Momo to the ground as Katsumi kicked her in the sides. Let's get something clear Yahorozu, Izuku will be all mine once I get Yang out of the picture. And a spoiled rich bitch like you doesn't deserve him, let alone be loved by anyone. You're weak, pathetic and will die alone and forgotten. Momo found herself getting kicked in the face by Katsumi as she had explosions in her palms. I'm going to teach you a fucking lesson. Before Katsumi could hurt Momo any further, John grabbed her wrists as Izuku helped Momo back up as he got between her and Momo. Good luck with that Bakugo, there's nothing you can do to hurt Yang or break us up. And if anyone here is pathetic, it's you. Izuku yelled at Katsumi as he checked on Momo as Katsumi glared at John. Fucking let me go vomit boy. Katsumi demanded as John took a moment to think. Okay. John let go of Katsumi's wrist, but he pushed her onto the ground. I don't know why Izuku's friends with you, people born without quirks and semblances, don't deserve to be treated like people. Katsumi went to attack John, but he dodged as lightning crackled around his fist and punched Katsumi right in the face, sending her flying back, leaving Katsumi in shock. And you wonder why Izuku hates your guts. John said as Katsumi was still in shock and pissed off, she couldn't believe that John somehow got a quirk or semblance and that she got humiliated by him, making her hate him even more. You okay Momo? Izuku asked while checking to see if Momo was hurt in any major way as she nodded her head yes to answer his question. Good, I'm glad she didn't hurt you. Izuku said as he smiled as Momo felt sad again as she ran off to her room, leaving Izuku and John both confused. Did I say something wrong? Izuku wondered as John shrugged his shoulders, then Izuku saw the smashed picture of him and Momo and picked it up, leaving the room while he glared at Katsumi as he and John left and went back to their rooms as they saw Eri and Yang were done unpacking Yang's stuff and were playing a video game together. Wow, you're a real quick learner Eri. Yang said while surprised Eri was pretty good at video games for her age, as Eri giggled. Thanks mama, Auntie Momo told me I'm a quick study. Eri said as she managed to beat Yang in the game they were playing as Yang smiled and ruffled Eri's hair. Good game Eri. Yang said as she saw Izuku in the doorway and hugged him as Eri joined in the hug while Izuku put Momo's broken picture on the table. Looks like you two are having fun. Izuku said while smiling as he picked up Eri and set her on his shoulders. We did papa. And mama's so cool. Eri said as Izuku chuckled and kissed Yang on the cheek. Yeah Eri, she really is cool and amazing. That's one of the reasons I love your mama. Izuku said as Yang blushed and hugged her boyfriend and daughter. You know what to say to me Izuku. Yang said as Izuku placed his hand on her cheek. You want to go for a drive on Bumblebee? Yang asked as Izuku nodded as Eri had stars in her eyes. I love Bumblebee mama. Eri said with glee as Yang looked confused for a second as she looked at Izuku. I may or may not have let Eri watch Transformers. Izuku said sheepishly as Yang just chuckled and kissed him. I couldn't help it, she gave me the puppy eyes and we ended up watching G1 one day and it snowballed from there. Izuku explained as Yang chuckled again as Eri looked confused. She's not talking about that Bumblebee snowball, that's what she calls her motorcycle. Izuku told Eri as Eri felt silly as Izuku and Yang both kissed her on the head. You want to spend time with Auntie RWBY? Well me and your mama go for our drive Eri. Izuku asked as Eri immediately nodded her head and ran to RWBY's room as the two chuckled as they headed outside and left on Yang's motorcycle. Meanwhile, Eri was spending time with RWBY, Blake, Weiss and Team JNPR in RWBY's room as Eri was having funny spending time with her aunties and uncles as she was watching Transformers Armada as Katsumi kicked open the door. Oh I vomit boy, how the fuck did you get a quirker semblance? Katsumi demanded as RWBY hit pause as Eri got scared hearing Katsumi yelled as she hid behind Blake as Purr got into Katsumi's face. I'd appreciate it if you'd not insult my boyfriend and scare my niece, you mutt. Purr said as she glared Katsumi as the mutt was extremely scared seeing Purr glare at her. Why you stay out of this Red? All of you are better off not being around that powerless waste of space. Bet none of you knew he was born without a quirker semblance. Katsumi said as Ren got up and also glared at her. As a matter of fact, we did know that, but we didn't let something so small and minor as not being born with a quirk or semblance change how we see John, because he's our friend and is like a brother to me. Ren said as Katsumi was more intimated but didn't think to leave. You still didn't answer my question vomit boy, how did you get powers? Katsumi repeated herself, yelling at them as Eri was more scared as Blake held her in her arms. SHHHHHH, it's okay Eri, we're here to keep you safe. Blake said as she calmed Eri down, while Nora gave her head pats as John got up and looked at Katsumi. That's for me and Izuku to know and for you to never find out. John said as Katsumi was not satisfied with John's answer as she tried to attack John again, but was met with Purr and Ren, both decking her in the face, making her fall flat on her ass as they slammed the door shut and locked it. Odd, she hasn't changed one bit. John said as Eri opened her eyes as RWBY hugged her. It's okay Eri, the mean boom boom lady won't hurt you. RWBY said as they continued watching Armada. What was with her? Weiss asked as John just sighed as he looked at Weiss and began explaining. Even since Bakugo got her quirk, literally almost everyone around her kept praising her for it, and the praise quickly went to her head, making her think she's superior than everyone else, and I'm guessing that also made her think everyone who didn't have a quirk or semblance weren't considered people, and since I wasn't born with either and Izuku was thought to be quirkless. I think you can guess the rest. John explained as Weiss and the others got what he meant. Meanwhile, Izuku and Yang were enjoying their romantic drive as they missed doing this as they were relaxing near a lake as Yang was laying against Izuku. I missed being alone together like this Izu. Yang said while smiling as she kissed Izuku on the cheek. Yeah, they always feel nice. Izuku said while looking back at all the times they've had romantic drives before as they rested their heads together. They watched the lake while only having themselves and the sounds of the water accompanying them as they felt completely relaxed being together when Yang's phone rang as she got up and answered it. Hey mom, what's up? Nothing, just taking a break while on a drive with Izuku. Yang said as she talked with her mom while Izuku watched the clouds. Summer's still alive in this. Yes mom, we got settled and fine, mostly. You want us over for dinner on the weekend? Yeah, we'll be there mom. Izuku overheard what Yang was talking about as she said bye to her mother and hung up. Yes, we're up for dinner on the weekend. Izuku remarked as Yang sat down and kissed him on the forehead. Yep, mom and dad are going to be over the moon when they meet Eri. Yang joked as Izuku chuckled and held her hand. Eri's going to be overjoyed when she meets Wei, she's always wanted a dog. Izuku said while laughing as he imagined Eri's reaction as Yang giggled too. We'll have one happy little snowball, especially when we give her some siblings, Yang said with a flirty tone near the end, which made Izuku blush like crazy as Yang started giggling. I'm just teasing you Izuku, almost forgot how fun this is. Yang said while still giggling as she hugged Izuku and shoved his face between her breasts, while Izuku just went with it and hugged her back. After that little mess with Kitsumi, Eri eventually fell asleep as RWBY picked up her adorable niece and tucked her in before kissing her on the forehead, which made Eri smile in her sleep. Well, that's just great, we're basically stuck with a female knockoff of Carden who's a superpower supremacist who discriminates against everyone. Ren said as everyone in the room all agreed without hesitation when Blake remembered something. Speaking of that racist dickhead, he hadn't shown up for class at Beacon for almost a month. You guys think he finally got expelled or dropped out? Blake questioned as the others took a moment to think. Well, I'm pretty sure if he were expelled or dropped out, we would have heard about it from the teachers by now, don't you think that'd be the case? Weiss questioned, which was a pretty valid point, while John and Pura both shared looks with each other that the others didn't notice. Well, either way I say good riddance. I have no idea why he wasn't expelled sooner, since that fucker had shown time and time again he is a horrible person, both in his not so subtle discrimination against Fanis, but him constantly trying to bully John for no reason. Pura said, which definitely took the others by surprise, since they never heard Pura speak with that much disdain for someone before. Good thing Eri isn't awake to hear that. RWBY said as Eri didn't wake up from Pura's little tangent. Pura has a point though, Kartik should have been expelled for all the shit he pulled and for not doing any of his work, trying to make me do it. God, I was an idiot for giving that dick too many chances. John said when suddenly, both he and Ran flinched while both clenched. Ran, you and John are okay? Nora asked, both curious and a bit worried about the two. Yeah, we're fine, Nora. Just feels like some poor soul just got kicked in the balls. Ren said when they heard some faint yelling, recognizing it as Yang upon listening closely as they heard Yang was now on their floor as they were a bit scared to open the door, but Yang suddenly calmed down as Izuku opened the door. Hey guys, we miss anything? Izuku asked while Yang was clinging onto his shoulder with a smile on her face as they sat down. Well, nothing much aside from that mutt bursting in here and screamed at John for no reason. Weiss explained as both Izuku and Yang face planted. Yeah, that checks out. God, and she wonders why I refuse to see her as anything other than a classmate and nothing more. Izuku said as he saw Eri sleeping, which made him and Yang smile as Izuku ruffled Eri's hair. Suu, what was with that outburst just now, sis? RWBY asked as Yang let out an extremely annoyed sigh. Well, me and Izuku got back from our drive, and the moment we got off Bumblebee, Mr. Stick Up His Ass runs outside and starts yelling at me for having a motorcycle, saying it's dangerous and kept heckling me about even after I showed him my damn license. And I tried my best to ignore him, but he kept getting on my nerves, so I may or may not have activated my semblance and kicked him in the dick. Yang said sheepishly as Izuku just chuckled and patted Yang on the head. HMPH, he sounds like a huge jerk. Is he always like this, Izuku? RWBY asked Izuku as the others look at him, looking for an answer from him. Yeah, more or less. He is a bit of a. Okay, he's a total control freak. He basically tries to micromanage the hell out of damn near everything and everyone. Hell, during the entrance exam, he interrupted one of the teachers for not mentioning something the teacher was about to explain and threw shade my way from being a bit excited, and I just went off on him for being a dick. Izuku explained as Yang was proud of her boyfriend and kissed him. That's my man, not being afraid of giving people a piece of his mind. Yang said with love and affection in her voice, making Izuku blush and rubbed the back of his head as Blake got up and went to leave the room. Hey, where you going, Blake? Izuku asked while everyone else was wondering where she was going. You know where that girl with the ponytail's room is? Think her name's Momo. Blake asked as Izuku told her where Momo's room is as she thanked Izuku as she walked out of the room, as the others wonder why Blake wanted to know where Momo's room was, but they just shrugged it off. Blake made her way to Momo's room as she could hear Momo crying on the other side as she knocked on the door, waiting for a moment before she opened it and saw Momo with tears streaming down her face as Momo noticed Blake at her door. Belladonna. What are you doing here? Momo asked the fondest girl in between tears as Blake closed the door as she sat beside the crying heiress. Just wanted to talk with you, you feeling alright? Blake asked Momo, who wiped her tears. Why yeah, I'm fine. Something just got in my eyes. Momo said, but not convincing Blake in the slightest as Momo looked down, seeing she didn't throw Blake off. No, I'm not. The thing is, I'm in love with someone who's already in love with someone else. Blake finished Momo's sentence as Momo looked at Blake with shock. How did you know I was going to say that? Momo asked as Blake looked back at her with a hint of sadness in her eyes. I know what it's like to love someone who's already in love. Blake answered as Momo immediately felt sorry for Blake being in the same situation she's in. I'm sorry to hear that, Belladonna, that must have been really hard for you, just like it is for me. Momo said, giving her sympathy to Blake as she sighed. Yeah, he's an amazing person. He's so kind and sweet, he's extremely smart, but not in an overbearing or condescending way, and he's always willing to help people when he can. Blake, while looking back as Momo was completely listening to her. He's one of the most handsome boys I've ever met, his smile is so bright it can light up a whole city, his voice is like an angel whenever he sings, and just looking into his emerald green eyes was enough to make me feel calm and safe. Blake said as Momo quickly realized Blake was taking about Izuku as her eyes widened. Why, you're in love with Izuku too? Momo asked in shock as Blake nodded to answer her question. Yang talked about Izuku all the time, going on about how amazing he was and how much she loves him. And after me and Weiss met Izuku for the first time, we both figured out why Yang was so head over heels for him. I still remember how excited Yang got whenever Izuku came to Beacon to visit whenever he had the chance to, even I was. Blake told Momo, who quickly pieced together where Izuku was whenever he left for a long period of time, without telling them where he was going. Izuku was also the person who convinced me into going back to my friends after I lost my cool and told them I was a faunus. He didn't think any different of me, and he opened up to me about what he went through when he was mistakenly thought to be quirkless. Hearing all the pain he went through because of a simple misunderstanding, a kind person like Izuku never deserved it. Blake said while reminiscing about Izuku's words to her. He told me he made a mistake not telling his parents sooner, worrying that would make things worse, but they ended up being pretty bad when the truth got out to them, and he told me that facing problems alone isn't the best solution, and that my team care about me. Well, RWBY and Yang did without a doubt. Weiss was a bit of a mess back then. Blake continued her story to Momo as she saw a teardrop from her eyes. Izuku then encouraged me to stop hiding who I was and be proud of who I am, and he told me he'd always be there for me as a friend, and just hearing that made me fall for him even though I shouldn't have. And the rest is history from there. We went back to my team, and I told them everything, and eventually, I revealed I was a faunus to everyone, which was taken mostly well for the most part. Blake finished telling Momo her story as Blake found herself being hugged by Momo. Izuku means a lot to me, he's helped me both a better person and hero, and I've been grateful to him for that. I was really down in the dumps when I lost during the sports festival, and while I was alone and crying, Izuku was there to comfort me. Momo began explaining to Blake as she gave the rich girl her attention. And he told me I shouldn't let one little setback make me rethink everything and let it serve as motivation to improve myself, and after he cheered me up, we just started talking afterwards. Momo said to Blake, smiling while looking back at that moment she shared with Izuku. For the past few years, I've had people try to be friends with me either for my family's wealth and influence or my body, but Izuku didn't care both either of those and genuinely cared about me. And after that, we hung out more and more, being best friends, and I caught feelings for him. Though I feel like a bitch for loving someone who already has a girlfriend he loves. Momo said with sadness when Blake hugged her as Momo hugged her back. I really needed that, thanks Belladonna. Just call me Blake. Blake said as Momo just smiled at her newfound friend. Then it's only fair you call me Momo. Blake smiled back as she noticed some of Momo's books, as she took a look at one of them, which led to the two girls talking about their shared love and appreciation for books for the rest of the day. The next day came around as class went well, but the fact Izawa was lazily and half-assing his teaching didn't go unnoticed by teams RWBY and JNPR, as both Weiss and Pura couldn't believe how low Izawa was speaking, as the two had to put an effort to take notes due to necessity, and both were too scared to ask him to repeat himself. John and Ren were both shocked at how lazy Izawa was being, while RWBY and Nora was genuinely confused about him being a teacher, as Yang and Blake were both flabbergasted, leaving Yang unsure of if it's genuine or if he's doing it on purpose to make them fail. And since Izuku told her Izawa expelled a whole class because they didn't meet his standards, Yang was leaning towards the latter. Izuku and John decided to have a little sparring match as they went to the training grounds, as some of the others decided to watch, as they watched from a good distance away, as Izuku's lightning crackled around his fists, while Izuku and John both got into battle stances. Ready to go John? Ready Izuku? Full cowl. John yelled as red vein-like lines coursed throughout his body before lightning started sparking off him, as he and Izuku rushed towards each other and clashed. The clash broke as Izuku and John got knocked back before John rushed back to Izuku and went for a kick, only for Izuku to block it with his arms, and pushed him back before using his lightning to rush towards John, and bashed his fist into John's stomach. The impact pushed John back, but he kept his ground and grabbed Izuku's arm, before throwing him into the ground and went to attack Izuku, but he used his lightning to help him move out of the way, then throwing a lightning bolt at John, followed by a lightning grenade, making John go on the move. John then saw a lightning tether around his leg which Izuku used to trip up and slam John into the ground, before pulling John to him and giving John a chance to kick Izuku across the face, as the two began throwing rapid-fire blows at each other. The others were watching with lots of intensity, as Yang and Pura were both cheering on their respective boyfriends. I can't believe it, none of us have ever seen Izuku fight like this before. He's using more power than he didn't against me and Bakugo during the sports festival. Shoto said while being surprised with how much more power Izuku's putting into his spar with John. Izuku and John can read each other like books, so they have to keep coming up with more and more different strategies to beat the other. Yang said as Izuku switched to using his light and used it to temporarily blind John, before grabbing him by the arm and spun him around before throwing him back. Izuku then put his hands together as started charging a ball of light and aimed at John, who regained his sight but saw Izuku charge his blast and fired it right at him as John braced himself and took it. John regained his footing as Izuku ran towards him, and right before Izuku got close, John jumped over Izuku before kicking him across the face. John then rushed towards Izuku and punched him to the ground as everyone flinched when Izuku hit the ground. Whoa, Ark's quirk must be something else if he's able to put Izuku on the ropes. Kirishima said while in absence of seeing the two lifelong friends fight. Yeah, John's quirk is so cool. It makes him super strong and super fast. Both Ruby and Nora said in sync, making the two laughed upon realizing that as Izuku threw a punch at John which he limboed under, followed by him throwing a kick at Izuku who jumped over it before they jumped back from each other. Both focused energy into their fists as they rushed towards each other one more time and punched each other in the face, and the impact from each punch sent the two tumbling back as they ended up laying on their backs as Izuku got up before helping John up. Looks like another tie. Izuku said as he and John started chuckling as they put their arms around each other's shoulders and walked back to the others. They made their way back to the dorms as they saw Mineta laying outside the dorms, unconscious and pretty beat up as Izuku face planted. God damn it, he was perving again. Izuku said as Eri walked out of the dorms and ran to Izuku and hugged him. Hey, Snowball. Papa, well you and Uncle John were training. A pretty lady with red hair came looking for Auntie Purra, and she also threw the creepy grape out through the door. And she kind of sounds like Auntie Momo. Eri explained as some were confused by what Eri was talking about as they went inside and saw the woman Eri was talking about as Purra immediately knew who it was. Urza, I missed you so much. Purra said as she ran towards the older Redeed and hugged her, to which she hugged back. I missed you too, sister. Izuku's classmates were in complete shock and disbelief upon seeing Urza as they all knew that she was a hero and very well known for her intense intimidation factor, and they were all trying not to piss her off, except for Momo and Kitsumi. Kitsumi was typically pissed off seeing someone way stronger than her, but she was more pissed off that she couldn't do anything due to Urza being a hero, and she's getting extremely deep shit. And as for Momo, she in complete shock due to hearing the uncanny resemblance between her and Urza's voices, as she honestly thought she was hallucinating and that she's been studying too frigging hard as she sat on the couch while slightly stumbling. So, how are you settling in, Purra? Urza asked her younger sister while having a hard time keeping her eyes off Eri, who was sitting on Ruby's lap while Ruby was poking the Snowball's cheeks, making her giggle. It's been good, Urza. Well, most of our new classmates are nice. Emphasis on most. Purra admitted sheepishly while rubbing the back of her head. I know what you mean by the most part. That disgusting grape tried making advances at me before trying to cop a feel, so I threw him outside. Urza said as she was cringing, remembering Mineta's beyond pathetic pickup attempts. How the hell did that guy even manage to get in here anyway? Like, that guy isn't even remotely close to acting like a hero, let alone a decent person. Yang asked as Izuku just looked at her and shrugged. Couldn't tell you why he's here in the first place, nor why he hasn't gotten expelled yet, Yang. As Awa damn well knows what Mineta has done, but refuses to do a damn thing about it. Izuku explained as everyone face planted. For someone who claims they are rational, Eraserhead makes the least rational decisions. Especially judging by the fact the man barely gets any sleep. I might have to have a talk with him. Urza said as she caught a look at Kitsumi as she leaned towards Purra and whispered something in her ear as Purra nodded. John then rolled up a piece of paper he had in his pocket into a ball as he chucked it at Kitsumi as it landed right on her head, making her angry as John, Izuku and Yang both chuckled under their breaths as Kitsumi stomped towards him. Boy, the fuck was that for Vomit Boy? Kitsumi yelled at John as he decided to play dumb. I don't know what you're talking about, Bakugo. Care to elaborate? John asked while Izuku and Yang had smirks on their faces while giggling. You damn well know what I'm talking about, that ball of paper you threw at my head, Kitsumi yelled, getting mad at John's little display of confidence as some of the class started to chuckle. I don't know what you're talking about. After all, in your words, a weak, frail and insignificant powerless person cannot do anything to someone as awesome, strong and beyond special as yourself, am I right, Kitsumi Bakugo? John said while pissing off Kitsumi as she hated that John was making fun of her. Knock it the fuck off, Vomit Boy, or else I'll beat your ass just like I did when we were kids, Kitsumi threatened, seemingly forgetting that Urza's right near her as Yang got up and glared at her. So, it's okay for you to bully Izuku and John for something far out of their control, but when John does something that's a very minor inconvenience to you, that's too far. Yang asked, pointing out Kitsumi's double standards as the mutt tried to attack Yang, but Blake grabbed Kitsumi by the wrist and slammed her into the ground. "Grrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr," you stupid fanus Blake cut Kitsumi off as applying more pressure to her wrists, making Kitsumi scream in pain as she let go as Kitsumi ran off in a rage as Blake sat down. "Whoa, that was awesome, Blake," Yang said as she patted Blake on the shoulder as Eri had stars in her eyes. "You were so cool and brave standing up to that meanie auntie," Blake Eri said as she hugged Blake, which made the fondest girl smile and hug the little snowball back. "Yeah, you really showed her how skilled and cool you are, Blake," Izuku said while smiling as Blake subtly blushed, which no one noticed. Then Momo decided to speak up. "So, how did you end up meeting Ms. Urza in the first place, Izuku?" Momo asked as Izuku turned to look at her. "Oh, I met Urza through a friend who helped me with controlling my quirk. And it was through Urza me and John ended up meeting Purah, and let me tell you, John was immediately head over heels for her. It was embarrassing," Izuku explained while laughing at the past as John got embarrassed while Purah blushed a very bright red. "Dude, you were the same way with Yang when we were younger," John said, hoping to get Izuku embarrassed as well. "John, you straight said it's a pleasure to meet me by complete accident while stumbling with your words. You'd think someone who grew up with 7 sisters would know how to talk with girls without looking silly," Izuku retorted as John just looked at his best friend. "Izuku, there's a difference between talking with a girl you're related to compared to a girl you're not related to. There's not that much of a difference, John. Aside the blood relation, there's not too much different," Izuku said as John just chuckled as he and Izuku placed their hands on each other's shoulders as the two brothers in all but blood just smiled at each other. "Oh, we were nervous wrecks around Yang and Purah when we were younger," Izuku said as he and John started chuckling while thinking about how awkward they acted around Yang and Purah in the past as the two girls joined in. "Ah, Natsu and Gray could take notes from you too and not constantly arguing," Urza said while looking at the two boys. "They aren't that bad, Urza," Izuku said in response to the older redeed. "Well, it feels like they keep arguing every chance they get," Urza said as Izuku did give her that as Eri handed Urza a candy apple as she felt touched by Eri's kindness as she accepted the candy apple and gave Eri head pats. "So, how have you been here, Izuku?" Urza questioned Izuku as RWBY handed Eri to Izuku as he set her on his lap. "For the most part, pretty good, Urza. Aside from some obvious exceptions, I've enjoyed my time at UA. Though I really miss seeing Yang, so I was happy to find out she's learning here now," Izuku said while smiling as he rested his head on Yang's shoulder, making Yang smile. "And I miss seeing you every day, Izuku. Not seeing you in the morning never felt right to me," Yang said as she kissed Izuku on the forehead as they hugged Eri. "Hahaha, I'm so happy I have such a cool and kind mama," Eri said while smiling as Momo felt sad that she couldn't be that for Eri, which no one, aside from Blake, seemed to notice. "Hey Eri, guess what, you get to meet your grandparents on me and RWBY's side on the weekend," Yang said as Eri had stars in her eyes as she got really excited as she jumped up and down with joy. "Really, I can't wait, Mama," Eri said as RWBY picked up her adorable niece. "Trust me, you love them, Eri," RWBY said as she hugged Eri while Eri giggled and smiled before her stomach rumbled as Izuku then decided to make food for everyone. After a while, Izuku finished making the food as everyone started eating as they were all digging in, absolutely loving how good Izuku's food was. "Oh, I missed eating your food, babe," Yang said before she started eating her food again as Eri burped. "Yeah, Papa's cooking is really good, just like Grandma's," Eri said as she continued eating as Izuku just rubbed the back of his head. "Well, I did take up cooking as a hobby from Mom," Izuku said, pretty sheepishly while smiling, making Momo and Blake blush, but kept it hidden, while Urza couldn't help but be entranced by his smile. After everyone finished their food, Izuku did the dishes with John's help as the two had them all clean in no time flat. "Man, your cooking's still really great, dude," John complimented his best friend while patting Izuku on the back. Thanks John, but I'm not that good," Izuku said as John just chuckled, which then led to the two ruffling each other's hair. "Hey, would you and Purah be up for a double date with me and Yang sometime next week?" Izuku asked as John nodded as Izuku smiled as they high-fived, while Yang and Purah just looked at their boyfriends with love. "You got a good one, Purah," Urza said as the two red-headed sisters hug each other. "I know, Urza. I couldn't ask for a better boyfriend than John," Purah admitted as Izuku and John fist bumped. "Boys like Izuku and John are pretty hard to find," Urza said while Yang blew a kiss to Izuku as he caught it with his head and smiled. "Yeah, they are. Me and Purah are both really lucky to be with those two," Yang said as she turned to look at Eri, who was being read stories by Blake while Momo had her on her lap. "Looks like Blake's made a new friend," Yang said while smiling as Izuku and John went to their rooms while Yang and Pura followed suit. The couples reached their rooms as the girls entered first as the boy looked at each other as they walked as the doors closed. Gotta say, it was funny and pretty satisfying seeing John put Kitsumi in her place. Yang said while giggling as Izuku kisses her on the cheek and sat beside her on the bed. Nice to see Momo and Blake are getting along great. Izuku said as Yang rested her head on his shoulder. Yeah, she seems really nice. Yang said as Izuku wrapped his arm around her waist. Momo's one of the nicest people I've met. Izuku said as he and Yang cuddled as they smiled, lovingly embracing each other. Hey Yang. Hearing that had Yang look at Izuku, wondering what he wanted to ask her as they looked each other in the eyes. Are you really content with not knowing what happened to your birth mother? Izuku asked as Yang wrapped her arms around him. I'll be honest, a small part of me does want to get some form of closure in regards to her, but the rest of me has everything I want in life, so I don't really care much about that anymore. What made you ask? Yang asked as Izuku wrapped his arms around her. Just curious is all. Meanwhile, John was blindfolded as Pura had a present for him, as he was wondering what it was going to be, as she told him to take off the blindfold, as John saw what his present was. John completely blushed bright red as Pura lightly pushed John onto the bed, leaving her on top of him. You like my present, John? Pura asked with a seductive tone in her voice as John just nodded his head up and down, as Pura smirked as she leaned down and kissed John, and before they could get further, they heard a knock on the wall. Don't have too much fun over there, Yang and I aren't in a rush to have any nieces or nephews. Izuku's voice could be heard from the other side of the wall, as Yang's giggling was also heard as John and Pura just rolled their eyes. Meanwhile, Blake had finished reading Erie's stories as the snowball fell asleep, leading to Momo picking Erie up as patted her on the back. Just how is she so adorable? Blake said with a lower tone in her voice as to not wake up Erie. That's one of life's greatest mysteries, Blake. Momo said while smiling, holding Erie in her arms. Erie really loves Izuku. Y said while she moved a strain of Erie's hair out of her face as Erie had a smile on her face. Well, Izuku was the first person to show Erie genuine love and compassion. Let's just say Izuku found Erie while she was being experimenting by a heartless monster who only saw Erie as a cure, and I had never felt so much hate nor seen Izuku with such anger and rage on his face. Momo explained as Blake, Weiss, Urza, Nor and Ren all had a moment of intense rage, but the rage subsided. I hope Izuku really made that bastard suffer for what he did to the little bean. Nora exclaimed as Blake and Weiss nodded in agreement. Oh, Izuku made more than sure of that. And he would have killed him, but Izuku realized that death would be the easy way out and just completely destroyed his arm. Momo explained as she remembered the satisfaction Izuku had when he made Overhaul rightly suffer for what he did to Erie. And after we brought Erie here, Izuku was the one to help Erie be happy again, and now she's the happy snowball she is now. Momo said while smiling as Urza smiled, both hearing and seeing firsthand just how much Izuku cared about Erie. Momo then brought Erie to Izuku and Yang's room as she handed the two their sleeping snowball, making the couple smile as Momo tried her best not to shed tears as she was getting thirsty, as she then went to make herself something to drink. Meanwhile, Blake went to her, Ruby and Weiss's room as she made sure to check she was alone as she pulled something out from her pillow, being a framed picture of her and Izuku together as she smiled at it, albeit sadly. I'm so sorry, Yang, I'm such a horrible friend. Failing in love with your boyfriend, I'm so selfish. Blake thought to herself as she hid the picture back under her pillow. A few days then passed as the weekend rolled around as class was finally over as Izuku, Yang and Ruby were overjoyed, while Leiri was beyond excited to meet her grandparents on her mama and auntie's side of the family. Izuku was gathering some things for Erie to keep her busy for the car ride in his room as he pulled out a briefcase as he finished grabbing Erie's things as he headed downstairs and met up with Erie, Yang, Ruby and his parents. Ready to go, sweetie? Inko asked as Izuku nodded as he put the things in the car before he helped Erie into her car seat as Yang handed Blake her keys to Bumblebee. Make sure nobody even looks at Bumblebee weird for me, Blake. Especially Mr. Stick Up His Ass in the Mud. Yang said as Blake nodded her head. Relax, Yang, that won't happen, I promise. Blake said as she and Yang hugged as Izuku and Ruby waved their friends goodbye as they got into Inko and Toshinori's car as they drove off and were on their way. A while passed since Izuku, Yang and Ruby left as John, Pura, Ren and Nora were watching the original 1986 Transformers movie. I don't get why people still blame Hot Rod for Optimus's death. Sure, he should have stayed out of Optimus and Megatron's fight, but he didn't pull the trigger on the gun that killed Optimus. Pura said while she was snuggling with John. Well, what Hot Rod should have done was shoot the gun away from Megatron instead of tackling him like an idiot. John said as he rested his head against Pura's shoulders. Why didn't Optimus just shoot the gun out of Megatron's hand or shoot him in the head? Nora questioned while looking at John and Ren. Well, Optimus figured Megatron would have used Hot Rod as a Cybertronian shield. Ren said as John realized something. Wait a minute, why didn't Optimus just move out of the way? He literally just stood there, basically asking to get shot. John stated as Nora, Per and Ren took a second to think about what John just said, as their eyes all widened at once, as they had a simultaneous mind blow. Oh my god. All four of them said at once as they finished watching the movie as they headed to the common area to get something to eat, as they saw Momo and Blake just hanging out together, talking about books and whatnot, while Weiss was also with the pair. Seems like those three are getting along well. Purr said as Weiss got up as she walked towards the others, leaving Blake and Momo to themselves. Oh, I remember one time Izuku was hanging out with us, and it was an extremely hot day, so we went to a big lake Izuku and Yang knew. And the whole time we were swimming at the lake, Izuku used his water abilities to make the whole thing extremely fun, and made a sprinkler in the middle of the lake. Blake told to Momo, which made her giggle. That seems like something Izuku would do. I remember when it was storming very badly one night and the power was out, and Eri was understandably scared, so Izuku used his light powers to become a walking nightlight for Eri, and he sung her a lullaby to help Eri fall asleep. And it was the most adorable thing I've ever seen. Momo said as the description made Blake smile. That sounds so adorable. Blake said while smiling. You know, it feels weird that Ruby and Yang aren't here. Like, this just feels odd to me. Y said as the others agreed. Yeah, we've been around them so often, it feels wrong that they aren't here. Nora remarked as the absence of Ruby and Yang made them feel off. Meanwhile, after a good while of driving, Izuku, his parents, Yang and Ruby, made it to their destination as they all got out of the car as Ruby helped a sleeping Eri out of her car seat and held a little snowball in her arms as Yang opened the door to her parents' home. Mom, Dad, we're here. Yang called out as she was hugged by her parents, while Izuku and his parents walked in, which led to them being hugged by Tai and Summer. It's been a while, Tashi. Tai said as he gave the big guy a hug right as Ruby walked in with the sleeping Eri, which piqued Tai and Summer's interest. Ruby, who's that little angel you're holding? Summer asked her daughter as Ruby began to wake Eri up. Eri, wake up, Snowball. Ruby said softly as she gently rocked Eri, which got her to wake up. Ma. Auntie Ruby, are we there yet? Eri asked while she rubbed her eyes as Tai and Summer were both confused by this little girl calling Ruby all night as they looked at Izuku and Yang right as Yang grabbed Eri from Ruby's arms. Mom, Dad, this is Eri. Me and Izuku's adopted daughter. Eri, these are me and Auntie Ruby's parents, Tai and Summer. Yang said as Eri immediately lit up as she ran to them and smiled. Hi Grandpa Tai and Grandma Summer. Eri said with lots of enthusiasm as Tai couldn't contain the adorableness and comically fell backwards, while Summer quickly picked up her granddaughter and hugged her. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god Tai, we have such a cute and adorable little grandbaby, she's so precious. Summer yelled with joy as she was hopping up and down, while Eri was giggling with glee. Tai got back up and dusted himself before joining Summer in hugging their granddaughter as Yang just chuckled. Looks like Mom and Dad already love Eri. Yang joked while Linko and Toshinori just smiled at their two friends when Izuku heard a familiar barking sound. Incoming. Izuku said as he kneeled down as he saw Zwei run towards him and licked Izuku's face. Hey boy, missed me? Izuku asked, which got a happy bark from Zwei as Izuku patted him on the head. The doggy. Eri said as Summer put her down, letting Eri run his way as she rubbed his head. He's so cute, Papa. Eri said, which made Izuku smile as Zwei licked Eri's nose, making her giggle as she then rubbed Zwei's belly. Yang smiled as she took pictures while Linko and Toshinori sat down and started talking with Summer and Tai as Izuku and Ruby slid outside. Up for a little contest, Ruby? Izuku asked, which confused Ruby as Izuku grabbed his briefcase and opened it as he grabbed what was inside. Been a hot minute since I've last used Holy Requiem. Izuku said as Ruby knew what Izuku meant as she pulled out Crescent Rose in its sniper rifle mode. You're on, Izuku. Back at UA. Momo was in the middle of training with Urza as she was fighting with her sword while Momo was using a bow staff. Momo was on the back foot of Urza's attacks as she was able to block most of her attacks, but Urza wasn't giving Momo much room to react as Momo was shrugging to keep up. Meanwhile, Weiss was watching the two spare as she felt a sense of deja vu as she closed her eyes. Flashback. Weiss was in a fight against Izuku as the heiress was on the defensive against Izuku as she could not believe the aggressive approach Izuku was taking, constantly being in her face. While Weiss was able to block Izuku's attacks, every strike from his blade felt stronger than the last as Weiss felt like she was running low on options to beat him. On Ice Queen, what happened to all that confidence you had? I thought you were made of sterner stuff. Izuku said to Weiss as she found herself in a sword clash with Izuku while their friends watched. He did not just throw in an Optimus Prime reference, did he? Purah asked, deadpan as John, Ruby and Yang just nodded while chuckling. I don't get it, why doesn't Izuku just finish the fight and knock her down? He's clearly stronger than Weiss. Nora asked, which got Ruby, John and Yang looking at her. That's the thing, Nora, Izuku's not looking to beat Weiss. John said, which made Nora confused as Izuku started overpowering Weiss in their clash. Their strikes are too slow and are lacking in power. Izuku said, which caught Weiss by surprise as he started making Weiss back up as she kept trying to hold her ground. This must be a first for you, isn't Shni? Being bested after having everything go your way for most of your life. Izuku said, which got under Weiss's skin as she tightened her grip around her weapon. You don't know that. Weiss shot back as for a brief moment, she managed to push Izuku back before he overpowered her again. Just what are you doing, Izuku? Ren thought to himself as he kept focused on the duel between Izuku and Weiss. Based on you thinking better than everyone around you, that just proves me right. Izuku said as he won the clash and kicked Weiss back as she tries using her glyphs to slow Izuku down so she can regain her bearings, but Izuku used his fire to melt his way through before throwing fireballs at her. Weiss managed to dodge Izuku's fireballs and used her glyphs to shoot projectiles to counter Izuku's fireballs and also managed to knock Izuku's sword out of his hand, but Izuku quickly pulled out Holy Requiem and used its fire setting to counter her projectiles while using his lightning to help him over around fast. Izuku managed to shoot all of Weiss's projectiles as he used the grappling hook mode to trap Weiss's legs and yank the line, making Weiss fall to the ground as he put his gun away and grabbed his sword and ran towards Weiss as he jumped into the air as the two clashed again. You lack conviction, Weiss Shni. You haven't begun to tap into your true potential. Izuku said as Weiss noticed lightning spark off Izuku's sword. You better know what you're doing, Izuku. John said to himself, knowing what his best friend was playing at as they saw lightning spark off Izuku's body. I bet the only reason you got into Beacon was because of Daddy's money. Am I right in guessing that? Hearing that question from Izuku made Weiss snap as she worked up enough strength to equal the odds with Izuku as she kicked him back. Don't you dare bring him into this. Weiss yelled at Izuku before using her semblance to freeze the ground under Izuku to trip him up before having projectiles shot at Izuku as she rushed towards him. Izuku smirked to himself as he used his sword to block Weiss's projectiles before blasting lightning at Weiss, but she created a shield in front of her to block the lightning as she started throwing strike after strike at Izuku, which he managed to perfectly block them all. Izuku then went to attack himself, but Weiss managed to knock his sword out of his hand as she pointed a rapier at Izuku as he playfully held his hands up. You win, Ice Queen. Izuku said simply and casually, which caught Weiss off guard as Izuku went to get his sword and sheathed it. All you have to do now is keep that speed and strengthen your strikes while keeping your cool, and you'll be good to go. Izuku explained, which got a laugh from Yang, but Weiss was more confused. You were winding me up on purpose, why? Weiss questioned Izuku as he just walked up to the Ice Queen and looked at her. You needed to vent out your frustrations. It's true I don't know you too well, but I did tell you have some baggage you needed to iron out. Trust me, I know firsthand that keeping stuff like that bottled up is not a good way to deal with your problems. Izuku explained, which piqued Weiss's curiosity to what Izuku meant with that last part. Unlike your scumbag excuse for a father, I know you're a good person under all that frost, but you have to change your attitude because you may not know it, you're acting just like him. Izuku said as Weiss thought about what Izuku said and she knew he was right. Yes, I really am weak and pathetic. Weiss said dejected but then looked at Izuku as he just smiled at her. I won't say that, you were just scared. It's completely normal to be scared. Izuku said while Weiss couldn't help but blush slightly. Flashback end. Weiss opened her eyes as she continued watching Momo and Urza train, as Weiss only had one question while remembering her fight with Izuku. Why did he let me win? Weiss wondered to herself as Urza managed to disarm Momo of her staff as she went to create a sword, but Urza grabbed her wrist and threw Momo into the ground. Not bad, but you still have a ways to go to improve yourself. Urza said as Momo just hung her head down. Don't remind me. Momo said under her breath as she saw Urza offering her a hand as she took it and got back up as they headed back inside the dorms. Back with Izuku. Izuku and RWBY were in the middle of a little contest to see which one of them were the better marksman, as they had a little shooting range set up as Izuku finished up his turn. Beat that little Rose. Izuku said jokingly, which made RWBY playfully pout as she decided to be a bit fancy as she used her semblance to help climb up a nearby tree. She then fired Crescent Rose's bullets at the targets and RWBY was doing good, but she ultimately lost her balance and fell out of the tree, but thankfully Izuku managed to catch her and Crescent Rose. Are you alright, RWBY? Izuku asked RWBY while she was slightly shocked with it just happened, but she looked into Izuku's eyes and RWBY subconsciously blushed slightly. Yeah, I am Izuku. Thanks. RWBY said as Izuku smiled and put her down as he dusted her off a bit. Maybe refrain from doing something like that next time, RWBY. Izuku suggested, which RWBY took note of as they both saw Eri playing fetch with Zwei. Good boy's way. Eri said while smiling and gave the doggo a big hug, making his tail waggle. Eri's definitely having fun with Zwei. RWBY said as Eri gave Zwei head pats as Yang joined in. Yeah, I knew Eri would love the little guy when she asked me if we could get a dog one day. Izuku told RWBY as Inko, Toshinori, Tai and Summer watched Eri play with Zwei. I thought RWBY was adorable when she was little, but little Eri is otherworldly adorable. Summer squealed with glee as Inko did the same thing. I thought the exact same thing when me and Tashi first met Eri. Inko squealed as Tai looked up at Toshinori as he wondered something. How on earth is that kid so freaking adorable? Tai asked Toshinori, but all he gave a shrug. Honestly, I couldn't tell you the answer to that, Tai, she just is. Toshinori said as Izuku and Yang were sitting together on the ground while Eri and RWBY kept playing with Zwei. Izuku and Yang are doing great job at being partners to that little ray of sunshine. Tai said as he and Toshinori rested their hands on each other's shoulders. They are, thanks to having us as role models. Toshinori said as he and Tai laughed together. Eri's having so fun, Izuku. Yang said as she hugged Izuku while watching their little snowball having a lot of fun. Little bean deserves it. Izuku said as he kissed Yang on the cheek. Back at UA. John was chilling in the common area with his team, along with Momo, Blake, Weiss and Urza when suddenly danger sense went off. John has danger sense, Black Whip and float unlocked. John, what's wrong? Purah asked as John shot up and looked around. Someone dangerous is nearby, I can feel it. John then followed danger sense as the others followed suit as they ended up outside Izuku and Yang's room. They're in Izuku and Yang's room. John said quietly as Momo heard a familiar voice inside the room as her eyes widened. It's Toga. Momo said quietly as everyone looked at her as she started explaining. She's a member of the League of Villains who's a complete yandere for Izuku, and she can turn into other people by drinking their blood. Momo explained, which gave Blake an unfortunate sense of deja vu as John came up with a plan. Urza, you and Momo head outside and guard the window in case she tries to make a run for it. John said as the two girls nodded and headed outside as John and the others got into battle stances and drawed their weapons as John put his hand on the doorknob. Inside the room, Toga was going through Izuku's stuff, looking for things of his to steal, while waiting for him to come back so she could kidnap him, but she found a picture of Izuku and Yang dancing. And to say Toga was beyond pissed off, that's an understatement, she was absolutely vivid. Who the fuck is this skank stealing my Izu from me? Oh, I'm going to track her down and break her for stealing him from me. And then I'll torture and rape Izuku for cheating on me, Toga yelled out loud when the door flew open as John used Black Whip to capture her. Stay the fuck away from my brother, you crazy ass bitch. John yelled as he tightened Black Whip around Toga. Oh, I didn't know Izu had such handsome friends, I bet your blood will taste amazing, Toga said very creepy while lying up John and Ren, which understandably freaked them out, while also gaining anger from Nora and Purah as Nora ran up and punched Toga across the face, while Purah slashed her cheek. Leave our boyfriends alone, you crazy blood-obsessed creep. The two girls said in unison as Toga licked her blood from her cheek, which weirded them all out. That's it, guys. Do you have any idea how unhygienic that is? Weiss yelled at Izuku's blood-obsessed stalker, while Blake felt a bit sick when the rest of the class gathered around and all freaked out seeing Toga. Ichako and Tsu, Toga yelled towards Ichako and Tsu, which made the two cringe. Ark, this is unacceptable, we need to let our teacher handle this. Iida yelled at John as he was getting fed up with Iida's shit. Then where the hell is Izawa? John asked Iida, who didn't answer the question and completely disregarded it. We are not allowed to use our quirks in public without permission, regardless of the issue. Iida yelled as everyone got fed up. That stupid law got changed years ago to where public quirk usage is acceptable, as long as it's not for anything illegal, you moron. John snapped at Iida as Toga took the change to throw a small knife at John, grazing his cheek and made him drop Black Whip as Toga jumped out the window, only to find herself pinned on the ground by Urza and Momo. Nice try, villain. Urza said as Momo made two sets of handcuffs to put onto Guy's feet and legs as Izawa finally showed up as Urza just glared at the man. You and me are going to have a little talk with Nezu. Urza ordered as she dragged Izawa by the ear towards Nezu's office as Team JNPR gathered around the handcuffed Toga. Pretty kinky, don't you think, boys? Toga asked as Purah has enough before she knocked Toga out cold with her shield. Meanwhile, Izuku and Yang were cuddling together in bed while Eri was still outside playing with RWBY. Man, Eri has lots of energy to spare. Kind of like RWBY when she was little. Yang remarked as Izuku smiled and kissed Yang on the cheek. That's our little snowball. Izuku said as he and Yang saw Zwei walk into the room and sat in front of the bed. You want up, boy? Yang asked, which got a quick bark from Zwei, as Yang just chuckled as Zwei jumped onto the bed and curled up beside Yang, as she and Izuku dozed off. Summer brought Eri and RWBY inside after the two fell asleep after playing outside for a long while, as she brought them to RWBY's room, as she tucked the two in, as Eri hugged RWBY tight while in her sleep. Seeing that made Summer smile as she kissed both RWBY and Eri on their foreheads, happy seeing Eri and RWBY cuddling together as she walked out, but saw into Yang's room and saw Yang and Izuku cuddling together. Still hasn't changed from when they were little. Summer thought to herself as she headed back downstairs as she sat down with Inko, Toshinori and Tai. Doesn't matter how old they are, it's always cute seeing Izuku and Yang being so close to each other. Summer said while smiling as Inko nodded in agreement. So Tashi, how's Izuku been at UA? Tai asked as Toshinori took a sip of the water he was drinking. He's doing great, though he hasn't gotten much practice with his weapons since he started, and the reason for that being he doesn't want one of his classmates and his homeroom teacher getting on his ass for no real reason, again. Toshinori explained to Tai as he took another swig of his water, as Tai just had a look of confusion on his face. Who the hell is his homeroom teacher? Tai asked as Toshinori and Inko looked at each other before answering Tai's question. Izawa. Toshinori said, leaving Tai completely shocked as he nearly fell out of his seat. That sleep-deprived jerk-off, that guy can barely take care of himself, how the hell is he going to take care of a bunch of kids? Tai asked in complete disbelief as Inko and Toshinori just shrugged their shoulders. He really doesn't. He rarely does his job, and when he does, he talks so painfully soft, it's like he's trying to get them to fail on purpose. And given he expelled a whole class on the first day, I can believe that. And the fact he has it out for Izuku just because he's Tashi's son doesn't help either. Inko said as Toshinori just nodded in agreement. And he's dealing with Kitsumi yelling in his ear, trying to get him to notice her. Inko said as Tai and Summer both face-palmed. Inko, we all told you hanging around her mother was a horrible idea. How many times did you bail her out of trouble, only to have her keep getting into more trouble? Hell, she never once was grateful for any of the times you got her out of trouble, and I swear I caught her eyeing up me and Crow a few times. Tai said as Summer felt ready to snap and kill a bitch. Okay, I will admit I may have had an error in my judgment, I didn't think she was that bad, though I was wrong. Still, I don't understand why Kitsumi did all that to Izuku in the first place. She'd rather be dead than be what other people tell her to be, so why act like everyone else? Inko wondered and took a moment to think before Toshinori realized something. Hey, where's Crow? Did he drink himself to unconsciousness again? Toshinori asked as Tai just shook his head. Nope. He was going to be here, but something came up and he left before you guys got here, though he didn't say what it was about. Tai explained, which piqued Toshinori and Inko's curiosity. Meanwhile, Izawa was in Nezu's office, getting an earful from him, while Urza was giving the sleep-deprived hobo a death glare. So, Toga managed to break in, and you only showed up after she was captured by your students, am I right? Nezu asked as Izawa was subconsciously shiting his pants. Well, I was busy with something else that was important and… Izawa tried to bullshit his way out of trouble before Nezu showed security footage of Izawa sleeping. So, you call being a lazy ass important? You were the only teacher here that wasn't doing anything, yet you decided not to do your damn job. Nezu said, on the verge of snapping, which made Izawa more scared than he already was. I could handle you sleeping while teaching, but sleeping while your students' lives were in the possibility of danger is absolutely unforgivable. Nezu said with great disappointment while Urza just glared at him. In between not taking care of yourself, giving a single damn about your job nor your students, and constantly singling out Izuku for no good reason other than your extremely petty bias against his father, you really are a pathetic excuse for a hero and a teacher. Urza said with complete disdain for Izawa as he foolishly decided to take back to Urza. What would you and that stupid little guild of yours know about heroics? Izawa's stupidity said, with unearned confidence as he immediately realized his mistake as he saw Urza getting pissed off. Urza then threw Izawa into a wall as she walked out of the room, as Nezu just shook his head in disappointment. In the common area, John and Iida were still arguing over the whole mess with Toga as John was understandably getting fed up with it. How are you guys used with that jerk's nonsense? Nora asked as Ichako just shrugged her shoulders. We're not really used to it, we just tune him out more than anything. Ichako said as some of the others nodded their head in agreement. Iida's a massive buzzkill all the time, ribbit. Sayu said as she thought about most time they tried to have fun only for Iida to ruin it. Not to mention he is kind of rude to Izuku for no good reason, even after Izuku saved his life. Shoto said as he slurped some soba as John just walked away from Iida as he kept yelling at John. What is that guy's problem? John thought to himself as he made his way to his room as he walked by Izuku and Yang's room as he thought of something as he entered the room. I wonder if Izuku has his sword with him. John wondered as he looked under the bed and saw a second briefcase, as he just smiled to himself as he left the room like he was never there in the first place. Guessing Izuku hasn't gotten much time to use his weapons, since Iida and Super Hobo would give him an earful, seeing him use them for no real good reason. John said to himself as he made it to his room and flopped onto his bed and took a nap. Meanwhile, Blake was minding her own business when she vaguely overheard something outside as she slipped away from the others and poked her head outside as she saw Kitsumi in the middle of an argument with someone over the phone. Damn that old hag, how many times do I have to tell you Izuku's already been taken by someone else? Yes, I'm torn up about it, but why are you so obsessed with me being with Izuku in the first place anyway? Kitsumi yelled as Blake was confused with what she was hearing. Yeah, well, maybe if I didn't listen to you I could still be Izuku's friend. But. Kitsumi immediately began dejected as she just looked at the ground. Yes ma'am. Was all Kitsumi said as she hung up as Blake quickly popped her head back inside as she was curious about what she just overheard as she went to her room. When she got to her room, Blake made sure Weiss wasn't nearby as she looked at her picture of her and Izuku, as what Urza said about boys like Izuku being hard to find was playing through her mind. Izuku's a one of a kind, and I never had a chance to be with him. Blake said to herself as she thought about all the time she spent with Izuku. I wonder, if I was childhood friends with Izuku, would things be different or would destiny still have Izuku get with Yang? Blake thought to herself while wondering about all the infinite possibilities that could have happened. Would she have gotten the chance to be with her knight in shining armor, or would she'd always end up losing to Yang? However, little did the Frontis girl know, she was going to get her chance to be with her beloved cinnamon roll, as Blake then heard Momo at the door as she told her she could come in, as Blake could tell something was up with Momo. You alright Momo? Blake asked as Momo as she closed the door as she walked to Blake's bed and sat beside her. Mind if I stay here for a while? Momo asked, which was a bit of a surprise to Blake as she looked at Momo. Sure, why exactly? Not that I don't mind, I'm just curious. Blake inquired as Momo handed Blake a letter which confused her as Momo began to explain. It's a love letter, I've been getting them for a while now, though I have no idea who they're from. They started off being not too frequent and I just ignored them, but now they're getting very frequent and I'm getting a bit afraid. Momo said as she started shaking a little as Blake hugged her, worried that Momo might be dealing with a stalker, something she and Izuku have some experience with. Don't worry Momo. Whoever is behind this, we'll make sure nothing bad happens to you, I promise. Blake said as she hugged her friend while consoling her. Meanwhile, Izuku and Yang woke up from their nap as they smiled at each other as they decided to stay in bed for a little bit longer. Ah, that was a nice nap. I'm feeling pretty refreshed. Yang as Izuku gave her a kiss on the cheek which made her blush. That makes both of us Yang. Izuku said right as Yang started tickling him as payback, which made Izuku giggle as Izuku went to tickle her back, but they saw a smiling Eri in the doorway as she ran towards their bed. Mama, Papa. Eri said with lots of enthusiasm as she was bouncing up and down as Izuku smiled as Yang lifted her onto the bed. Who's Mama's little energetic snowball? Yang asked as she poked Eri's cheeks, making her giggle. I am Mama. Eri quickly said with a smile as she hugged Yang as Wei woke up from his nap and licked Eri's nose, making her smile. Is Ruby awake Eri? Izuku asked as Eri shook her head. Nope, Auntie Ruby's still sleeping. Eri said as Izuku and Yang just smiled while Eri gave Wei head pats. Meanwhile with Ruby, she was in the middle of dreaming as she was in the middle of a field covered with the light of the moon as she felt someone tap her shoulder as she turned to see Izuku in a suit. Ruby blushed seeing Izuku in a suit as he handed her a green rose, looking like it's glowing due to the moonlight. Here you go, my little rose. Izuku said, making Ruby blush more as she took the rose from Izuku as he held her hand and wrapped his hand around her waist. Izuku? Was all Ruby said as she went to kiss him when she suddenly woke up, both blushing and confused as to why she was dreaming about Izuku like that as she quickly realized why. Oh no, it can't be. I'm in love with Izuku, Ruby said while internally freaking out over the idea of her being in love with her sister's boyfriend as she slapped herself. Alright, just calm down Ruby. It's probably just a simple crush, I'll get over it in no time. Right. Ruby thought to herself, not sure if she seriously liked Izuku or if it was just a silly crush she'll get over at some point, but part of her knew it was very serious feelings she had for Izuku. Meanwhile, Ruby and Yang's Uncle Crow was making his way throughout the city as he made it to a bar as he saw the person he was meeting up with, his twin sister Raven. Took you long enough to get here brother. Raven said which just made Crow roll his eyes in annoyance. Nice to see you too Raven. You know, most people would ask how things have been after not seeing their sibling after over a decade, but you're not most people, are you? Crow said as he sat across from Raven. So, what do you want? Crow asked while looking his sister in the eye. The girl can't just catch up with her family. Raven remarked as Crow was not convinced in the slightest. She can, but we both know you're not. So let's get on with it, what do you want? Crow asked again as Raven looked at him before she spoke. How was Izuku able to defeat Salem? Raven asked as Crow just chuckled while shaking his head. You came back out of the blue over a decade later and you asked about your daughter's boyfriend. You do know Izuku and Yang are a couple, right, given your need to spy on us? Crow quipped as Raven wasn't having any of Crow's cronus as she slammed her fist against the table. Answer the damn question, Crow. How was Izuku able to do what Osborne trained us for? Raven asked as Crow pulled out his flask and took a swig before answering Raven's question. See, Raven, it has to do with both the kid's power and his intelligence. His smarts are pretty self-explanatory, since he's one of the smartest people I've ever met and comes up with unique ways to use his abilities, so let's talk his power. On its own, Izuku's powers are impressive, being able to use multiple elements at once. But the real strength lies in his magic. And how would that be the case, dear brother? Raven asked before she heard Crow's answer. Kid's got Dragon Slayer magic. Hearing that completely shocked Raven to the core as Crow smirked seeing his sister so flabbergasted. So, you take that, mixed with an already broken enough quirk and a kid who's far smarter for his age, you got yourself quite the deal. And don't even think about trying to force Izuku to join the tribe. Crow said as he took another swig of his flask. Whatever could you be talking about, Crow? Raven asked smugly as Crow put his flask away. Don't play stupid with me, Raven. You want to make Izuku into a weapon for the tribe, but that's going to fail harder than that Mitsuki chick failed at being a mother. Izuku wants to be a hero, so he would never in a million years help a group of thieves and murderers, plus he wouldn't want to help the woman who bailed out of Yang's life like nothing. Hell, you're probably considering cucking your own daughter after hearing how strong Izuku is. Crow said, with an extremely smug look on his face as Raven was getting fed up with Crow's shit. Plus, you try to kidnap Izuku, you'd have get through with Yang, RWBY, Tai, Summer, Inko, Tashi, me, John and all of Fairy Tail first. Hearing that confused Raven as she just looked at Crow. Fairy Tail? Why would I have to worry about them? Raven asked as Crow just smirked as he stood up. I'll leave that for you to figure out. Anyway sis, nice to see you again, but I have a family gathering I'm missing. Crow simply said as he left the bar without saying another word to Raven. That's it guys. Thanks for watching and supporting us. See you in the next part.